Accutron watches present The Accutron Show, a time travel through American culture, with your hosts David Graver and Indrani. Visit AccutronWatch.com and discover the brand that has made American history with an all-new proprietary next-generation electrostatic energy movement. Accutron. It's not a timepiece, it's a conversation piece.
Hey there, Indrani.
Hey.
Today, we have a very special episode of The Accutron Show. We're actually stepping back and passing the mics over to Zara Rutherford and Alyssa Carson.
Zara's an incredible young aviator. At age 19, she became the youngest female pilot to fly solo around the world and the first person to complete a circumnavigation in a microlight aircraft after a 5-month journey.
As you may know, if you've listened to The Accutron Show before, Zara has been with us. Zara is an Accutron brand ambassador. Alyssa is an astrobiologist, PhD student, Aquanaut, and an International Institute for the Astronautical Sciences researcher. We're really looking forward to what these two young women have to say
On their way to Mars.
on this episode of The Accutron Show.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website, accutronwatch.com, and discover our Accutron DNA collection. Reimagined for a new generation, the Accutron DNA combines breakthrough technology, precise engineering, and modern aesthetics to achieve a new level of technical excellence. The Accutron DNA, the new face of time for those who blaze new trails.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Accutron Show. I'm here with Alyssa Carson, who is wanting to become the first person to go to Mars. And I'm also dreaming of becoming an astronaut. So my name is Zara Rutherford, and we're just going to be having a discussion on kind of how we got here, how Alyssa is completing her PhD program, and kind of what our dreams are and future aspirations.
I'm so excited to be here and chat with you about this. I mean, it's always so cool and so exciting anytime you are able to meet someone with similar interests. And even though, we had already mentioned kind of our area of, I guess, more expertise is very different. It's always really cool to meet people and talk to people who have an interest in space and have aspirations of going to space.
Yeah, totally. Actually, I had a question to kind of get started. You must get this all the time, but why, how did you know from a young age you wanted to become an astronaut? Why Mars? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so for me, I've kind of just always been fascinated with space. I've always been obsessed with the idea of going to space. I was essentially just always asking questions about space, and no one in my family really had any sort of space or science background or literally anything similar at all. And so when I started asking questions about space, my dad basically just told me, well, we've sent people to the moon before, and that was about all he had. And I was still curious, so I kept, asking to go and look for books or videos or posters or any sort of information. And then, as I continued to get older, I was still trying to consume more and more information about space. And then whenever I was 7, I went to the space camp in Huntsville, Alabama. And it was just my version of Disney World as a kid. It was all of the information about space that I wanted to know. It was everything that I was interested in. And so that just kind of solidified yep, this is exactly what I want to pursue. This is so cool. And I kept going from there. I mean, as far as the pinpoint one thing that got me interested, me and my dad have always thought it was just an episode of The Backyardigans, which was this cartoon on Nickelodeon, just because it is the only place we can think of that I would have heard the word Mars, because basically they had these imaginary adventures in their backyard. That was the whole concept of the show. And so they had a Mission to Mars episode, because I had the poster for the Mission to Mars episode. And so they went on this imaginary adventure to Mars. They flew a space shuttle to Mars, something crazy. And yeah, that's really the only place we can even think of as to where I would would have like heard the word Mars or space at that point. So I think that's where it came from. But
It's cool, yeah. I don't know that trip, but that's amazing. And actually, also, I feel like, I had dreams when I was a kid. Like, I remember I wanted to be like a zookeeper for a long time, but it's hard to like, stay motivated and really kind of stick to that. So how did you do that? Like to, at 7 years old, say I want to go to space, and then really like get involved with the space programs. I understand you've done your pilot's license, like scuba license throughout your kind of childhood. How did you do that?
yeah, so I mean, I definitely had like the same thing that other kids have where like you kind of bounce around between different like careers. But for some reason, like whenever I would think about other careers, it would always be like be an astronaut, go to space, come back, and then be a doctor. Or like be an astronaut, go to space, come back, then be the president or be a frog or like whatever the current interest was at the time, it was always like in my head, like in an order of like, oh yeah, I can do that after going to space. And so there was always just such a strong like interest in space that it always just like was first. So I mean, I still did loads of things like growing up that like weren't space related. Like I did ballet, piano, and like loads of other things. But I had interest in so many different things. But for some reason, space was just very like stuck out or very like high on the priority list, I guess. And then as far as like getting different things like done or like, wanting to do different things, after learning a little bit more about like what it took to go to space, I was basically slowly trying to figure out what area would make the most sense for me. And so I was essentially wanting to just try a whole bunch of different things. I was building, I thought, important skills along the way, but kind of wanted to try different areas of STEM and see kind of what made the most sense. I mean, I liked math and science in school, but I didn't really know what that would translate to like a real career. And so I was always just kind of trying different things to see what kind of fit the most and what connected the most, and slowly ended up with, wanting to do more science and research and be a researcher. And then even, after deciding to go into astrobiology is such like a interdisciplinary field. And so even after that, picking like the types of projects that I want to do was a whole nother battle of what I was most interested in. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've slowly ended up somewhere that I love. But yeah, it was always just like trying different kinds of things to get to what I thought I would enjoy the most.
Yeah, and so you mentioned astrobiology. Where exactly, like, what are you specialized in? What are you working on?
Yeah, so for me, astrobiology kind of, as I mentioned, is like such a interdisciplinary between all the sciences and like how they apply to space. And so you really can like take that and do almost any kind of space research and connect it to astrobiology. There are so many people that just like, throw the word habitability and then like consider it astrobiology, or, there's such a broad range of it. And so I was really trying to figure out something that I would be most interested in. And my undergrad research was astrobiology related, but just definitely not something I was super passionate about. But now that I've started my PhD, I'm working with archaea. So I work with methanogens, and basically we're looking to see if it's possible for methanogens to be living on Mars. So looking for potential signs of life, and basically doing that by simulating Mars conditions and simulating them in those Mars conditions to see if they grow, do they survive, a whole bunch of different factors kind of added on top just to see how they do, how they work. But there have been basically trace elements of methane found on Mars, and methanogens produce methane. And so that's kind of why that's kind of turned to be an area of interest for some kind of life that could be living on Mars. So that's kind of what I work in now, which is really exciting. And it's been really cool actually to start a PhD and really like pick something that I'm very interested in and then work on it, and this kind of just be my project and my like little baby that I'm creating of like all these different like research experiments and things to kind of add together. So it's been like a very different experience from undergrad and things like that. So it's just been really cool to kind of experience it and stuff. But I mean, how about you? Like, how did you like land on like electrical engineering? Like, what drew you to that specifically?
Yeah, I think I've always kind of like you said, I've always liked like understanding how things worked. And computers really bothered me because they just did not make any sense to me. Or like, for example, cameras or all these like electronic items. And I think that's what drew it to me first. And then I'm in my sophomore year of university now, so second year. And I love the classes. I'm doing like signals and systems mostly, but I'm like fascinated by satellites. So I find them pretty cool. And I think that's the first kind of thing. I People kind of ask why I didn't go into aeronautical, but for me, I don't know, electronics is pretty cool. But again, like because I'm only in my second year, it's still early days, right? I think one thing that's been amazing about the US education system is how broad it is. Normally in Europe, like from the get-go, you choose one subject and that's what you do. Whereas in the US, like they really allow you to switch majors and do loads of different things, which I really appreciate. And so it's allowed me to kind of explore different things. So I think next term, I'm doing like this class on orbital mechanics. So I'm really looking forward to that. Um, but uh, but yeah.
I mean, I think you made a really good point though. Like, especially when people think of like wanting to be an astronaut, I feel like most people just very pinpoint it to like a very few type of career possibilities that are out there, when in reality you can really study almost everything and eventually translate that to something space related. And so I think that's so important, because like I will have, you know, either people like ask me exactly what I did to get to like my current position, and I feel like it's always important. Like I'll say you can do everything exactly as I did it, or you can do absolutely nothing that I did and end up in the exact same position, because the space industry is just so broad, and it's like more important to be doing something that you're really passionate about and something that you really enjoy, rather than just doing something that I figured out that I enjoy. So yeah, I always just emphasize that so much, because it's so true that you can literally study almost any area and have that as your area of expertise, and then still end up in the exact same position. So yeah, kudos to you.
I think well, I'm still in my second year, so I'm not quite done yet. Actually, I was curious. So I'm kind of following behind you, I guess. Like I'm thinking of also doing a master's or a PhD. What would you kind of say to someone who's just starting off university, dreaming of going to space? What have you learned throughout like your education?
Yeah, you know, I definitely would first say that I always thought education was like so important, and so really important to focus on. You know, I did do a lot of travel with, you know, speaking and doing a lot of, you know, outreach as well, but, you know, I always kind of put my education first, and really tried to pick and choose things anytime like outside of school or whenever there was a break. So really prioritize your education. I do think that's really important, especially within the STEM industry. I think another really important thing, especially for people who maybe are still kind of figuring out what area you're looking at going into, or figuring out if it's right for you, I always encourage people with like STEM related careers to try to find someone either online or articles or anything like that, but someone that has that career, and really see what more of like a day-to-day job looks like, or what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. And I mainly say that just because so many space or STEM related jobs, they sound really cool and really out there. You know, I could say like, I'm looking for life on Mars, or, you know, or building a rocket, or, you know, whatever you may be working on. It is that cool, but I also think that it's important to also translate that really cool thing that you're working on down to like a day to day, what you realistically do. because I always thought that was super important because at first, I was kind of looking at astrophysics and doing kind of like that area of interest and pursuing that during school. But then I started looking, obviously we can't go to other galaxies, we can't like go to other planets. So much of the day to day is mainly just with your computer analyzing the data that we get from other satellites and things like that. And I really wanted more hands-on physical like experimentation and research. And so if I hadn't really like looked deeper, thinking of studying another planet sounds really interesting and sounds really cool, and I would love to do that. But realistically, I don't think that day-to-day really fits my interest. So seeing that side of it, I think is really important to take into consideration, just to make sure that you'll love that position and it meets kind of the style of learning and the style of job that you're looking at going into. So that's really big. And also, school always gets hard. I think we always have times where it gets tougher and we kind of struggle, but I think it's always important to remember why you went into it, why you started it, kind of where that interest started from. And I even had moments in school where I was like, oh, like this is really tough, should I maybe do something else? And I started doubting myself, and I was like, no, like I don't even know what else I would do, like this is definitely all I want to do. So kind of start to go back and always remember like why you got into it and your interests, because that will kind of help persevere through some of those harder classes or harder moments that you may experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like also if you tend to follow your passions, you're much more likely to be so good at like better at it. And that's really cool. So, what's been your biggest challenge so far, do you think?
Yeah, I think that for me, some of my bigger challenges have been one, just like in general, time management and trying to figure out and do everything that I want to do, but then also be realistic in like the day to day. So just kind of solving that kind of issue and trying to manage my time, obviously, work towards a career that I'm really interested in. Also, just relaxing some of the time and finding those balances between like work related things or career related things versus just taking time to myself and figuring out those balances. So that has definitely been a huge challenge. I think also starting so much of this at a young age, it was a challenge for a while to be taken seriously or kind of get that level of seriousness from other people. And I say that just because it makes sense, but anytime I would kind of talk to someone about like an interest in space, it was like, oh, cute, like being a little kid, wanting to do something related to space. They always just thought it was like cute that I kind of like space, but it was always trying to portray like, no, I like very seriously want to start like pursuing this and want to be like taken seriously or start really like being involved with research at a young age. I was very excited to take on that level of seriousness, and so getting that from other people was kind of always a challenge, or even just relaying how important kind of pursuing this career was to me was kind of hard to get across. So I think some of those were kind of the biggest challenges of just trying to get started and taking like that first step and like pushing your way into the space industry, because there are definitely moments that you kind of have to like set your foot down and just kind of be like firm in who you are, and especially sometimes when it comes to research, and having your level of like contribution expressed and told in any sort of capacity, whether it's like on a poster or during presentations or anything like that. It is really important to always get that across. So yeah, I would definitely say those sort of things. But I mean, I would love to hear more about your story as well. Obviously, flying around the world and your interest as a pilot as well outside of school. So maybe just kind of you can share a little bit about that, and then also maybe some challenges that you had during that experience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I was really lucky. I grew up in like a family of pilots, and I knew that I was going to fly from a young age. the dream was to fly around the world, but I think I I like believed it was impossible. So I admire you so much for that from 7 years old to say like I'm going to Mars because I wanted to fly around the world and like I wasn't like like I want to fly around the world. I wasn't like that. So I kind of let go of that until I was finishing up my secondary school, and that's really when I was like, actually, like this is my dream. I want to pursue this. Like it is easier than becoming an astronaut, right? It's like it doesn't take like years and years of education, but but I had a similar like thing where people wouldn't really take me seriously in the beginning, and it's like I'm trying to get sponsorship, I'm trying to do this thing, and like everyone's like, okay, great. Like you at the time I was 18 when I was trying to get sponsorship. When I left, 19, and it's like, okay, great. Like we've got an 18-year-old who wants to fly around the world. He doesn't want to fly around the world. So that was really tough, and it ended up working out, but like that was tough to get people to actually listen and say like, no, like I am doing this. In the end, it took me. I like had to give multiple interviews, being like, I am going to fly around the world without actually having the money for it. And finally, that was able to like convince people. Oh, okay, maybe she is flying around the world. And then I finally got sponsorship kind of by being convincing. But it was tough in the beginning. And you mentioned earlier as well, like kind of having sometimes times are tough and having to like say no, like I want to do this. Just to give you a bit of background, my trip took 5 months, a bit longer than planned, and that's because I spent a month stuck in Alaska in the middle of winter and just waiting. So I spent 4 weeks there just waiting for the weather to improve. And the temperatures had dropped down to like minus 30 degrees Celsius, and it's almost actually about the same in Fahrenheit. And I was like, I was pretty nervous because the plane had never been tested in those conditions. So like the engine, it's a pretty small engine, and that was tough to say like, okay, do I keep going or like do I not? Like, is this the time to call it quits? Like, at what point am I kind of going over the line in terms of like taking too much risk, right? Like, at what point is it the reasonable thing to kind of turn back? But I'm glad I kind of persevered, got some help from a mechanic to kind of get the plane ready for those temperatures. But it is tough. Like the mental, like there's obviously the physical challenge of like flying or like we do training as well for pilot and scuba diving. But then on top of that, the mental challenge, I would say it's so much bigger just to kind of persevere. So yeah, I'd say those are probably at least in the flying, that's one of my biggest challenges. In education, this was when I was much younger though, but when I was like 13 or 14, I was pretty bad at math. And it was like really demotivated. Like I remember like at 13, 14, I was like below average at math. And I'd kind of closed those doors already. I was like, I'm clearly not going to become an engineer. Like, this is not for me. I need to look elsewhere because I'm just not good enough at math. And even though like that's kind of what I wanted to do, right? Like I wanted to know how things worked. And for that, you kind of unfortunately need quite a bit of math. And so I started just, I think one day I was like, I want to make this work. I want to become better at math. And so I worked so hard to try and understand, like, what does the quadratic formula mean? Like, what is this? Like, 14 years old, I was like, this is insane. And I'm so glad that I was able to kind of push through that. And now, like, I really enjoy it. Like, I find it fun. It's still tough, but I find it fun. And I'm kind of so glad that I pushed through that. But also, I think, especially for high schoolers and kids, like, we've really put so much emphasis on math and like how some people have this natural ability and some don't, and I really don't believe, I don't know how you feel about that, but I just don't really believe in that natural ability. I think that just at the end of the day, like hard work can get you pretty far.
This podcast is presented by Accutron Watches. Visit our website accutronwatch.com and discover our legacy collection. Reviving some of the most memorable Accutron watches from the 60s and 70s, the Legacy Collection combines timeless design with the technical excellence of Swiss watchmaking, each limited to 600 individually numbered pieces. The Accutron Legacy Collection, inspired by the past, built for your future.
Yeah, no, I do completely agree. I think that I've always said, because I think that throughout like all the things I've done, I've had like a lot of people coin like, oh, you're just a genius, or like, oh, you're just like exceptionally smart, or like that's how you're able to do all these things. Or, I was very average in school. I was definitely not top of my class by any means. I was very, very hard middle, I would say, compared to other students. And even throughout college, I would say the same thing. I worked really hard to continue to kind of improve at the areas that I was weaker in. And yeah, it was always kind of a challenge to keep going through that, because obviously I knew that I wasn't going to be like the best student coming out of like the university. And so, I think some of those things are really motivating factors to know where maybe you are like a little weaker in, because I did well in school, but in comparison to other people, especially having like the idea of maybe becoming an astronaut one day, I mean, at the end of the day, it is looking at a resume, and I mean, luckily in school, they just see the degree and they're kind of happy with that. But yeah, it was always just knowing, okay, so if other people are better than me in like this area, how can I improve that area, or how can I stand out in a different way to really showcase, what I have to offer. And so it's kind of why I was always interested in exploring so many avenues at the same time, because I was always interested in any ways to like stay unique, or have something that maybe was different than other people, because there's always some reason to like stand out. And especially when looking at towards like the astronaut selection process, I always like heard from previous astronauts that sometimes they ask such mundane questions. Like there was one astronaut who in his like interview, they asked him if he knew how to change a car tire. And they were basically just looking for those like fine motor skills, or like how things work, because I'm sure they were, I don't know, maybe doing some repair on the International Space Station. But having that skill of like changing a car tire, you would never assume you would need in pursuing some sort of STEM interest. But it's true. I mean, any type of skill is a skill, and so it's always important to kind of keep going after different things that you're interested in, even if it doesn't feel like it relates at the time. So yeah, that's kind of how I took that approach. I was curious about any of your like favorite memories, like from your trip. Like what are some of like your top highlights?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the top ones are definitely kind of in the very northern parts of the world. So like Greenland, Alaska, Siberia was so unique because of just how remote they were, and also just their climate, right? Like you're in the tundra. I was there in the winter, so it was just like snow, right? Like for as far as you could see, it was just white. So no trees, no animals, no signs of human life. I mean, I'm sure there are animals, but you can't see them from the plane. Um, and and that was pretty unique to get to see that. At the same time, though, it's like amazing to fly through. In the back of your mind, like constantly you're like, okay, engine, like please don't stop, please don't stop, please don't stop, just because like yeah, there's nothing much you can do if you run into trouble. And then otherwise, like I was actually really surprised by the kindness and generosity of strangers. I I once hitchhiked with someone, which I don't recommend, but for example, I had a flat tire on Christmas Day in Singapore, and this really kind mechanic spent the entirety of Christmas Day helping me fix my tire, which was just incredible. Same thing with like in India, I when I landed at this kind of random airport that didn't have the fuel that I needed. And my plane was really small, so I was using normal like car gas, right, that you get at a petrol station. And the nearest one was like, I think it was like 20 minutes away. So the thing is, I only had like one small jerry can. And so there were like three guys on New Year's Eve who like, we drove 20 minutes, filled up one jerry can, drove back, put it in the plane. 20 minutes, like back and forth, just slowly filling up this jerry can until it took about 2 hours until the plane was like completely full. So that was like the second big thing that was just so incredible was being able to rely on strangers, really, and without them, like, it wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think it's always so amazing, like meeting other people. I think, in my traveling and experiences, especially during like talks and being able to actually like connect with different people, I always just like love those like personal connections that you're able to like foster. Um, Especially like I always love like young kids and like seeing their eyes light up whenever they like hear something that they're interested in. So yeah, those moments are always super special.
Yeah. Do you have like an encounter in particular that kind of sticks with you, or advice or anything like that?
I don't know. There's definitely been a few. I would definitely say that any sort of interactions with like young kids are really rewarding, just to kind of open their eyes to the possibility of things that they're able to do. I've had several talks. There was like this one girl that like afterwards she like ran up to me and she was like, I'm so excited, like I'm so interested in being an astronaut now, like that was so fascinating. And just like getting that direct feedback like after sharing a little bit about space with them was just so amazing. And I think that's like the biggest thing. I'm really passionate about talking to people and talking to kids about space, just because typically in school I think that we get told so much of like the same typical jobs, like become a doctor or become a lawyer or become a teacher, or kids don't necessarily know every sort of career option available to them, just because you don't really talk about some of, I guess, the more extreme or like detailed type jobs, I would say. And so being able to just share with them that this is an option that they're able to pursue, this is something that they can do if they're interested in it, I think is really cool, because it kind of opens their eyes to a whole new area of opportunity. Because especially when talking about space, I mean, there's definitely not just astronaut and engineer. I mean, there are so many possibilities. And so yeah, really just kind of opening their eyes to that is so special, and seeing them realize that there is more opportunity than what they typically think. And then it's always so much fun kind of like encouraging kids to even think of jobs that don't exist yet, because I always tell them the space industry is kind of changing so quickly, and so there's jobs that you guys will probably have the opportunity to do, but we just don't know of them yet. And so I'll always say, like, with like space tourism, like maybe there's like space flight attendants, or like space or like people working at like a space hotel, or like things like that that sound really crazy, but realistically in the near future may not be the craziest thing. And so they always get so interested in like coming up or like making up these like new space jobs that like could be a possibility. And so just kind of instilling that same like just like imagination that comes with space, because there is so much that we don't know. So I think that's always been kind of my most fun. And even speaking to adults, I think is really important, just because space is really something that we're all really connected to, but we don't realize it on a day-to-day basis, and we don't talk about it on a day-to-day basis. But the amount of like technology and products and things that we use every day that were either invented by the space industry or for the space industry in some way, or even just satellites and how interconnected we all are. We do have that connection to space, but the everyday person isn't going to really think past like our day-to-day life here. And so I always think it's really important to kind of open that avenue of, just remembering kind of our connectedness. And I think that's what has always kept me so interested in the space industry, is the more I learned about it, the more I learned about the importance of it and all of the benefits that we get from continuing to make advances in space. And so that made me just kind of want to contribute to the industry in any way possible, whether that is, eventually getting to go to space or not, but just being able to contribute to what we do.
No, I completely agree. There's so many cool jobs out there, like amazing jobs. I think in an alternate universe, it's quite niche, but I would have loved to be an air traffic controller. I think they've got a really cool job. But no, thank you. If you could take like any personal item with you to Mars, what would it be and like why?
I would say as far as like hobbies go, like I said, I did a lot as a kid. Like I played kind of like competitive soccer and I did piano and I did like a lot of different things. So I think that I had like a bunch of different interests. I would say now, I mean, I still have hobbies, but they look kind of different, I guess, just because there is so much time just dedicated to school. I have a dog, and so he takes up so much of my time. So whether it's like bringing him on like long walks or whatever, honestly, I consider him a hobby just because of giving him the best little life, basically. But yeah, getting him was a whole extra level of commitment and time. So yeah, basically taking care of him is my hobby. But yeah, I would also say like reading. I also recently moved for my PhD, so I recently moved to Arkansas, and there is so much like outdoor opportunity here, and so I'm really excited to kind of get a little bit more into that and kind of pick that up as a hobby. But there are basically these really elaborate like trails that go all through like everything and parks and different things, so I'm really excited to get a little bit more into doing like that kind of like biking and adventure biking, and yeah, maybe some hiking as well. So I've kind of just been learning more about all of the different like trails and stuff, so I'm excited to kind of get into that. And yeah, just kind of being outdoors a little bit more, because in the lab is not lovely all the time, so having some outdoor time is always good. So I'm excited for that. And then your other question, I think for personal items, I always thought about this because when I was younger, I had heard from like astronauts that they get like a really small bag of like things that they can bring, and so I was always like, okay, so like what would I bring? And I think I'd always kind of bring photos of like family and friends, or like any sort of like mementos that I would want to remember. I always said that I would be interested in bringing my Right Stuff Award, which was basically just an award that I got at space camp the first time that I went. So it's like a little medal, and it was just, whatever, some silly camp award, but I felt like that first time that I went to space camp was such like a pivotal, like really starting my journey, and so if I ever had the opportunity to go to space, actually bringing it to space would be such like a full circle and being able to like close that chapter. So I've always been interested in bringing that as well. I'm sure I will bring like so many like random things, like a pen or like just anything that I would want to say has flown to space. So I'm sure there'll be random things in there too. But I don't know if you have any as well.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it all that much. I feel like an instrument would be cool, although I'm really bad at instruments. I'd probably end up sounding really annoying. But I agree, like pictures definitely. I'd bring my cat if I could, but I don't think that's possible just yet. I imagine you might bring your dog if you could too. But yeah, so you should get your astronaut watch soon. I'm actually wearing mine right now, so it looks a bit like this. It's really cool. It's got like a black watch face. I get compliments about it all the time. So thank you, Accutron, for making this possible, because it's been really cool talking to you. I've followed you for a while, and it just kind of, your name came up in conversation, and I was like, she's like working towards space. She's kind of been working towards space for a really long time. So it was really cool to talk to you and kind of see where you were headed. Actually, one last question. I was wondering, when are you kind of planning to apply for NASA or SpaceX, or are you planning to go to NASA or SpaceX, or what's the idea?
Yeah, so for me, I have always looked at all of them as options. I had never really like singled one out. And yeah, I've mainly just been waiting for a selection to open, because there really hadn't been any sort of selection process, because they're basically random, whenever like NASA is in need of new astronauts. And so I've basically just been waiting for a selection process to open. That being said, one just opened, but I unfortunately do not meet the requirements yet. So I will have to wait at least until the next one to open. So I had noticed that Basically, they had changed it to needing at least a master's degree to apply, but I never really knew how that related since I basically skipped a master's and just started pursuing a PhD. So I didn't really know how that would translate to whenever a selection process would open, but it does require at least 2 years into your PhD. So I'm still in my first year, so unfortunately do not 1 year off basically and meeting the requirements of having an application in, but that is okay. It will come at the right time whenever it is. But as far as like NASA versus SpaceX or whatever that looks like, I think that for me, I was really just waiting till I got to the point of where I was looking to apply. And then whenever I was there, I would basically look to see of the possible options. I mean, technically, SpaceX doesn't have like a formal application yet. I mean, they've mainly just been flying astronauts to the International Space Station, and then they have like a few private astronauts that have kind of just been through random situations and getting there. So, yeah, I mean, I am open to other options. So I guess, yeah, I'm really just waiting to see, like, once I'm at a point in my education where I am able to apply, I'll kind of start looking at some of those. But it will be exciting whenever it comes. I didn't think I would get it necessarily in this application run, but I was just like wanting to at least do it for fun, just to see what would happen. But yeah, maybe in a few years whenever they open it again.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds amazing. Best of luck with that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be with the European Space Agency. You'll be with NASA, and then hopefully we can meet somewhere on the ISS. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much for this conversation, and again, yeah, thank you, Accutron. Accutron, I don't know if you knew this actually, but was on 46 NASA space missions. So definitely like a cool legacy. And thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to receive it. So thank you guys so much, and thank you, Accutron, as well.
Thank you for listening to The Accutron Show. To listen to all of our shows, visit accutronwatch.com. Remember to check out our special edition Accutron products in collaboration with La Paulina Cigars, Esterbrook Pens, Aceline Publishing, and Stave Puzzles. To learn more about the world of Accutron, follow us on Instagram at Accutron Watch. From New York City, until next time, Accutron time. This is Bill McCuddy.